Imagine a world without a map. A world where sailors feared falling off the edge of the earth. This was the world Christopher Columbus was born into, way back in 1451 in Genoa, which is in modern-day Italy. He wasn't born a prince or a nobleman. His father was a humble wool weaver, but young Christopher didn't want to weave wool. He wanted to sail the seas. He was fascinated by maps and the stories of faraway lands told by sailors in the busy port city. He learned to read charts to understand the winds and to dream of adventures beyond the horizon. It was a big dream for a weaver's son. Columbus lived at a very exciting time. People in Europe were desperate to find new, faster ways to trade with the East, places like India, China, and Japan. They called this region the Indies. Why? Because it was full of incredible riches. Spices like pepper and cinnamon were worth more than gold. Silks and jewels were things that every king and queen desired. The problem was that the land route, known as the Silk Road, was long and dangerous and controlled by their enemies. Getting to the Indies was incredibly difficult and expensive, so everyone was looking for a better way. Now Columbus had what many people thought was a completely bonkers idea. Most experts believed the only way to get to the east was by sailing east, around the massive continent of Africa. But Columbus thought differently. He had been reading books and looking at maps, and he became convinced that the world was a sphere, a round ball. He just had to persuade someone rich and powerful enough to pay for it. For years, Columbus tried to get someone to fund his daring plan. He went to the King of Portugal, but his experts laughed at Columbus's calculations. They thought the world was much bigger than he did and that he would starve before he reached land. He tried in Italy and even sent his brother to England, but everyone said no. It was a crazy, risky idea. Finally, after years of trying, he got his big break in Spain. King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella had just finished a long war and were feeling adventurous. They saw a glimmer of possibility in Columbus's bold plan. They agreed to give him the money and the ships he needed. His mad idea was about to become a reality. With the king and queen's money, Columbus could finally prepare for the voyage of a lifetime. He was given 3 ships. They weren't grand, majestic vessels, but small, sturdy wooden ships called caravels. The largest was the Santa Maria, which Columbus himself would command. The other 2 were smaller and faster, the Pinta, the Nina. Finding a crew wasn't easy. Who would want to sail off into the unknown, possibly forever? Columbus had to gather around 90 men, experienced sailors, a few adventurers, even some prisoners who were offered their freedom if they survived. They loaded the ships with supplies, barrels of salted meat and fish, hard biscuits, water, wine, cannons for protection. On August 3, 1492, the 3 little ships set sail from the port of Palos in Spain. Imagine the scene, families waving goodbye from the shore, probably thinking they would never see their loved ones again. The ships looked so tiny against the vast, endless Atlantic Ocean. For the first few weeks the journey went well. The winds were steady, pushing them westward day after day. But as the weeks turned into a month, the sailors grew restless and afraid. They had never been out of sight of land for so long. Every morning they would wake up to the same sight, water, water, and more water, in every direction. The crew started to grumble. They were scared. What if Columbus was wrong? What if they really did sail off the edge of the world? Or what if their food and water ran out before they found land? They were on the brink of mutiny, a rebellion against their captain. They threatened to throw Columbus overboard and turn the ships back towards Spain. Columbus had to be clever. He kept 2 logbooks, a real one for himself, where he recorded the true distance they had traveled, and a fake one for the crew, which showed a shorter distance to make them feel less far from home. He promised them riches and glory if they just held on a little longer. Finally, after more than 2 long months at sea, just when things were at their most desperate, they started to see signs: a carved stick floating in the water, fresh green reeds, a flock of birds flying overhead. These were sure signs that land was near. Hope surged through the exhausted crew. Then, in the early hours of October 12, 1492, a lookout on the Pinta named Rodrigo de Triana shouted the words everyone had been waiting to hear: "Tierra! Tierra! Land! Land!" By the light of the moon, they could just make out the shape of an island on the horizon. They had done it. They hadn't fallen off the world. They had crossed the mighty Atlantic. When the sun rose, Columbus and his men saw a beautiful island covered in lush green trees. He believed he had reached the Indies. He had no idea he was on the edge of 2 vast continents. He named the island San Salvador, Holy Savior. They went ashore in smaller boats, dressed in their finest clothes and carrying the royal flag of Spain, and were met by the people who lived there. These were the Taino people. They were curious and friendly, with brown skin and simple clothes, and they approached with wonder. Columbus called them Indians. The Taino had never seen men with pale skin, beards, metal armor. They had never seen such large ships. They welcomed the newcomers, offering food, fresh water, cotton balls, parrots. Columbus's men gave glass beads, brass bells, which the Taino found fascinating. For a brief moment the meeting was peaceful and curious. Columbus was on a mission for his king and queen. His three main goals: gold, glory, God. He was desperate to find gold. He saw Taino wearing small gold nose ornaments and became obsessed with finding the source. He sailed island to island, Bahamas, Cuba, Hispaniola, today Haiti and the Dominican Republic. He kept asking locals about gold mines, great cities, the powerful king of the East. The Taino could only point to other islands. The encounter shocked both sides. Europeans were astonished by strange plants, colorful birds, and different ways of life. They had no understanding of Taino culture, beliefs, or way of life. For the Taino, the Spaniards' arrival was bewildering. These men had powerful weapons, swords, crossbows. The Europeans claimed land for a distant king. That idea was alien to the Taino. This meeting, begun in curiosity, would soon lead to a dramatic, often tragic clash of cultures.